This session is labeled Migration, Interconnection, New Interdependencies. I think yours, the first paper, is not really on migration, but it is on interdependencies. Yeah. Certainly is. Michele Frix, that's your name, eh? Has written a paper together with Mr. or Mrs. Paul. Mr. Paul. Yeah. And conflicting discourses on aspiration, voices from Guatemala on migration and technology. And I know the disabled will come along. And I invite you to give your presentation for 20 minutes. And then we have 5 minutes discussants. Well, maybe 3 minutes for the discussants and 7 minutes for the public. Okay, please.
Okay. It's changed now to Voices from Latin America because since I started writing the paper, I went to more field sites. So now it's not just Guatemala. And these are my other research team members. This is briefly what the structure of my talk is going to look like, and it looks kind of long, so I'm going to skip that slide. So this field research was based on findings from over 160 qualitative interviews conducted with administrators and program beneficiaries in computer and vocational training centers, so basically telecenters, throughout Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, Guatemala, Colombia, and El Salvador. It's part of a larger study regarding the idea of employability in ICT initiatives in Latin America, and it builds off other work that we, the Technology and Social Change Group at the University of Washington, has been conducting. My particular analysis today is from a very programmatic stance. So one of my, as a researcher, I was looking at how programs address those that they're intended to serve, so their intended beneficiaries. And so today, and through this paper, what I'm mainly interested in is, does programmatic design of ICT initiatives impact both the adoption of telecenters in a community and one's aspiration to migrate in search of economic opportunities, considering we were using this employability lens. And I specifically look at that today with people with disabilities. So as you can see here, this is, we are funded through Microsoft as our study is, so we mainly paired with them and a program called Poeta, which is part of the Trust for the Americas and the Inter-American Development Bank. And it's a regional program that works specifically with at-risk youth, people with disabilities, and then in Colombia they work with demobilized and internally displaced populations. So we were actually, the point of Poeta is, it's called Program for Opportunities and Employment Through Partnerships in the Americas. So we were studying exactly that, the intersection of ICTs and employability for these populations. I also visited Colombia with a related study, and we went to some of the Colombian libraries, which just won the Access to Learning Award from the Gates Foundation. This is one of those libraries. It's pretty incredible. And it's actually named Parque España because it's a donation from the Spanish king. So some of the research frameworks that, well, I want to go back a little bit. So she's right in that today doesn't talk specifically about migration with people with disabilities, but it does talk about mobility, as people with disabilities are inherently very immobile in society. And the work in Central America with youth and then in Colombia with IDPs did touch on migration patterns. That's something that I want to explore further. But today I thought that I would talk more about the people with disabilities aspect. These are some of the research frameworks that we use. Aspiration, the capacity to aspire, initially within the field of anthropology, referred to the first step towards being able to step out of poverty. And then also employability, which we've defined not just as one's ability to get a job, but one's ability to keep that job, improve their quality of life, improve their income. And then we also go as far to define it as a livelihood, or one's ability to earn and then save money, whether that be through an actual formal job or informal sector. Also go off some critical views of ICTs in development, and then the idea of community participation within programmatic design of ICTs. I think unpacking the idea of community participation is particularly important when you're thinking about the investment in telecenters that are intended to serve people with disabilities, considering the majority of recent efforts that are geared towards people with disabilities are focused on technology, and before the model of it was more of a charity or philanthropic model of helping people with disabilities. So I think it's important to consider how people with disabilities are incorporated into the development of these telecenter programs. Really briefly, just to give you a little bit of context, there's approximately 50 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean that are disabled, which is nearly 10% of the population. 80 to 90% of them are living in 82% are living in poverty, and 80 to 90 are unemployed. This is also similar statistics worldwide as well. There's also the idea of the medical model to the social model. The medical model deems disability as something to be cured. So it, rather than a person having a disability or someone being visually impaired, someone is blind or someone is handicapped or someone is minusvalida, as some countries in Latin America still refer to people as disabled as less valid. So there's this idea, this movement that is nothing about us without us, which is a social movement led by people with disabilities to reclaim their rights. And there's also this idea about high stigmatization and discrimination in society of people with disabilities. Santiago Duarte is the president of Vida Independiente, and his quote here is particularly telling regarding the idea of how political public spaces in Latin America for people with disabilities, they're highly immobile due to many different structural barriers, and he says that this is a good way to describe that. Either you die in your house or you go out and fight, which is also highlighting the idea of this social movement. We also, in our study, are looking at the UN International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which you can see here maybe in this small map that Venezuela is the only country that hasn't signed it in Latin America. This convention is particularly interesting because there is a portion of it that is in regard to people with disabilities and their access to technology and ICTs and how they can reclaim that right. All right, I promise I'm getting to the technology part of it. So some of the things that we observed assistive technology in the field were screen reading and magnifying technology, adapted mice, keyboards, and trackballs. Also for people that were visually impaired, the digitization of text, so scanning text into digital formats. And in many of these ICT training centers, people with disabilities felt that technology was kind of like this infinite window for them, something that if once they acquired technical or ICT skills, they were able to jump into any educational opportunity or employment opportunity, and that it was going to be kind of their fix. But we found that this was also accompanied by false hope in many cases. But unfortunately, although there was some assistive technology, a lot of it was do-it-yourself and adapted by users. So you can see here this person had double prosthesis, and by using this apparatus in conjunction with these mice, she was able to make a single right click. Unfortunately, although it looks very innovative, it was very cumbersome and very time consuming for them to utilize this technology. So essentially, although there might be some innovative user adaptations in the field, there still is a great lack of affordable, high quality technology for people with disabilities in Latin America, and I would also assume in Africa as well. Connecting it to mobility, mobile telephones are viewed as something that also gives great independence and mobility to people with disabilities. For the deaf, for example, if you have a cell phone and you're able to send a text message, that eliminates your need for not only someone that knows sign language and can interpret for you, but that is present and can make the phone call for you and facilitate that conversation. For the visually impaired as well, it highly increases one's independence. And something that users also mentioned was that it reduced dependence on your family. So if you were able to have a cell phone, you could get around on your own, you could go apply for jobs, you could go to school without having to rely on your family, which is common. On another side, there is also this risk of theft, which I think I mentioned yesterday, but one particular anecdote was that one of the people that I was working with, that I was doing a lot of interviews with, lost his cell phone, and I got out of touch with him for a while. And when I bumped into him, he said, "Oh yeah, my cell phone was stolen, and I'm not planning on buying a new one." And I was like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "That's the fourth cell phone that I've had stolen from me in a month, and it doesn't make sense for me to keep buying them anymore." It wasn't exactly that he couldn't afford the rechargeable cards, he just couldn't keep affording buying the new cell phone, because visually impaired people are so commonly robbed that a lot of them, once they have a few cell phones stolen, they just don't buy them anymore. Another really interesting anecdote was I was text messaging with someone, but I had no idea that he was actually blind. And when I first met up with him, he said, "Michelle, I think it's hilarious that you're doing a study about people that are visually impaired and you were text messaging me." And I said, "Well, you were text messaging me." And he actually has a software that allows him to, that's really expensive, especially in Latin America. And he has a really expensive cell phone that is the only one that will work with that software, that allows him to listen to his cell phone. And I'm going to do a demonstration of one of those as well. But he doesn't ever take that cell phone out of his house. He has a really fancy cell phone that he keeps in his house, and then he has like an old Nokia that doesn't really matter that much to him, that he actually uses when he goes out into public. So he kind of, this interesting commodity of a really nice cell phone is only for when I'm at home and I know no one's going to, I'm not at risk for it being taken from me. Here's an example actually of a phone that my dad uses. My dad's also a wheelchair user, and when he was acquired a disability, my dad's 65, he wasn't even using laptops before he was in a wheelchair, and as soon as he was going through rehabilitation, the occupational therapy gave him this laptop with voice recognition software and all these fancy things that could enable him to communicate with me in Seattle, and I don't think he ever turned it on. And it sat in our closet for 2 years, and finally we realized that we needed to find something that was for him to be able to communicate with us, that worked for him. So as you can see here, simplicity for everyone, the Jitterbug phone. It has very few buttons. It's very easy to operate, especially for people that have motor disabilities. And now I'm going to show an example of, if I can get this, another mobile phone that's used for people with visual impairments. This was, you can see that? This was developed by Sean Kane, someone else at the University of Washington, not in my same research group, but in the same information school. And he's developed cell phone technology using the iPhone for the visually impaired.
Home. Phone book. Mail. Music. Phone book. Mail. Music. Phone book. Phone book. 10
So it's a series of taps, and sliding allows someone that cannot actually view the screen to use it.
Jason K. Nicole T. Tom Cruise. Woody Allen. 10. Calling Woody Allen.
Okay. I also want to mention that although many people with disabilities do view technology as this kind of saving factor for them, technology is also very disabling as well, especially if you have very limited access. And limited access also means cost. So software for people with visual disabilities is extremely expensive, $1,000 to $2,000 in Ecuador and Colombia, and when the average monthly salary is $120, it's very unaffordable for people. Thanks. Oh, I'm gonna need to skip to the point here. So through our work in Colombia, I also was able to, was shown a different form of these telecenters that was more than just ICT training, but it was actually this idea of opening up the entire community to people with disabilities through the library. So you can see a visually impaired user here, where this technology that was not available in any other centers that we saw, and it really actually gave more mobility to people with disabilities within this community and allowed them to be more present in society. And which gets to my point, and I've kind of gone on too long, but basically what I'm looking at is comparing the idea of what we saw in the libraries, so this idea of forming community, and taking the idea of technology out of it so much and making it more about community participation and empowering users, and rather than just the acquisition of ICT skills, actually increased people returning back to the center once their computer class was completed. In the case here in Ecuador, these users were together for 6 months and never saw each other afterwards, never returned back to the telecenter, and there was no sense of community afterwards, as opposed to in the libraries where they actually are holding national elections for the Association of the Blind and Deaf in Colombia. Users come and use the library for computer services when blind users. Even though they have all the technology in their home, they'd rather be in the library because of that interaction that they get from other blind users and the idea of community. So my very premature and preliminary thought is that these two different program models, so ones that focus specifically on community development rather than ICTs, and those that, like this one here, which is strictly an ICT training center, can have a fundamental impact on whether someone aspires to migrate out of their community and leave with those new skills that they've acquired, or whether they choose to stay within their community and invest and become more of a leader in this social movement built of people with disabilities, and they seek opportunities in teaching others about the computer skills that they've learned, because they are so vital to people with disabilities accessing employment and education. So I have not very much time left. Okay. Well, I was going to show you some other videos, but I don't think I do. So basically, some programmatic recommendations that we found as a result of these user perceptions were to encourage people with disabilities to be instructors and mediators in these ICT training programs rather than people without disabilities teaching the courses. The development of low-cost assistive technology, as well as the promotion of free and open source software like free screen readers for the blind, and support for educational opportunities, as well as as talking about yesterday about the idea of provision of basic needs versus ICTs. That's another thing that people with disabilities do advocate for, is the idea of that they need adequate active wheelchairs before they actually need a computer and accessible technology. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to skip a lot of this, but I can answer questions afterwards. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of that.
Oh, it's not done. The paper presented by Michele, okay, examines the role of ITC and vocational training initiatives of marginalized people lacking local economic opportunities. The target groups are Latin American people, and the countries, as she said it in her presentation, where the interview I held is Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, Venezuela. Basically, according to the authors, the interviews are held with demobilized and displaced people, youth, people with disabilities, and administrators of social programs. I think they wanted in the paper to stress two things. The first thing is people who want training in order to migrate. And then the second thing is technology as a building block of creating opportunities and perhaps to remain in Latin America for a lot of the cases, to strengthen the local skills and local community, if I understand the paper. I think they conclude that they are facing here in a need of much greater emphasis on studying people with disabilities, at-risk youth, and demobilized and displaced population. In my thinking, I think that is great indeed. The paper is dense and I think is amazingly written, as one can find a lot of details on economic and social marginalization in Latin America, the social impacts of ITC for development. The database is huge because they said they did 150 interviews and focus groups in 7 countries, 1,400 pages of interview transcription. I think that is a huge database. I nevertheless wanted to ask maybe 2 or 3 questions very shortly. So after finishing reading this paper, so my first question will be, who is behind this study, a part of Microsoft Community Affairs? This is my first question, because this kind of question, this kind of studies also, I think with Telefonica, we have them in Latin America, and they want maybe to give charity or something. And the second question is about the term youth at risk. In my sense, I think it is polemic. I don't know, maybe I didn't understand well when I'm reading the paper. What I wanted to know is perhaps what are the key factors which determine the notion of that at risky, the notion of, and this. I think this make to think again, once again, on the concept of poverty. We were talking yesterday with colleagues here, because it is very linked. And for me, the term remain very confused, in spite of the intention you done, giving some sense of explanation in the presentation. And the last question is, so I'm wondering where really one can find the social mobility that is the article is talking about, because can we find it through the training for fostering community development, or through the ITC training encouraging migration? So I didn't. No, I'm asking about the social mobility that the article want to stress, I want to point out. So because the article ended in a kind of ambivalence analysis, because I think there is 2 ways here. One is the training for fostering communities, and the other way is the ITC training encouraging migration. So this is my short contribution.
Yeah, because there's. Yeah. Please go ahead.
So your first question was who was behind the study more than Microsoft Community Affairs? Basically, Microsoft Community Affairs, and then in collaboration with Poeta. So I understand that that does actually give a bias to our study, considering we're basically evaluating in a sense, but we're not. I mean, we're independent researchers, but in a way we were sort of evaluating the work of that relationship between Microsoft and Poeta. But I wouldn't say that we were ever evaluating, because we were also visiting vocational centers that weren't funded by Microsoft in order to balance. How do we define at-risk youth? Was that your next question? The at-risk youth that we were working with in Brazil and Central America were 15 to 25 years old. And we go into a really descriptive analysis of what at-risk really means, and I understand that that's also a kind of a problematic term in the larger publication that we just put out. But they're between 15 and 25 years old, living in urban slums that essentially are at risk of gang affiliation or drugs or violence, if I was going to sum it up really quickly. And I think what this paper is a starting point of is kind of thinking about the idea of community training, community development through ICT training, and how those two can be combined in order to lead to better community development, as well as the acquisition of ICT skills for these people, or these populations, and all of them identify ICTs as something very important for them, as they are marginalized people. They view their access to education as very limited, access to job opportunities, and see computer skills as something that can help bridge that gap for them. So I don't doubt that ICTs are important, but I think that putting less of the emphasis on the technology part of it and more of it on the community participation part of it is what I'm trying to prematurely argue here, and basically merits future research.
Okay, maybe now there are questions? Or here? No? Nobody?
Michelle, can you? It was not very clear for me from the paper. I read it very quickly yesterday, and probably it's because it's a very dense paper. So, as Papa said, explain a little bit more about the mobility part. I mean, it's very interesting that you are focusing on people that have problems for mobility, right? And but at the same time, they are using the ICT for their own more the social mobility. But what about the? I think in your paper you talk also about geographical mobility, isn't it? And what's your main argument here? Yes, but yes, both, yeah.
I combined all three of them in the paper, which is a little bit daunting. But what I saw I'll take for example with at-risk youth in Central America. So there was kind of two populations of young people in these telecenters. Some young people that highly aspired for migration to the United States to seek employment opportunities and saw ICTs as their key to that migration, and that was how they were going to achieve that. And then others that were actually opposed to that idea of migration out of Central America, out of Guatemala and El Salvador, and saw ICTs as a way for them. It's still related to social mobility, but the geographic part was either someone's aspiration, which is what I'm talking about, aspirations, because I've only done the work in Central America with people that have not yet immigrated. And then with internally displaced people in Colombia, they were coming together in ICT training centers as a way to get basically acquire entrepreneurial training and start their own small businesses after they had all experienced a process of rural to urban migration in Colombia. So once they had been demobilized or internally displaced due to civil conflict, they were forced into an urban center and found community within this ICT training center. And through the technical skills that they acquired, they were able to access seed capital and basically stay in that urban area rather than return back to the rural area that they had come from.
Thanks. I think this clarification is interesting, and we'll come back to your paper later. Now we turn the roles, please. Papa So from the University of Warwick will discuss a paper or present a paper, ICT and co-development among Catalonia and Senegal, obviously about migration, I think. And it's a paper written together with a Mr. or Mrs. Ali Soutin from the University in Saint Louis, Senegal.
Okay. It is Mr. Rosner Alosita. Thank you very much. I think in the title they put ITC and co-development among Senegal and Catalonia, but I will rectify. Maybe I prefer in Catalonia or in Senegal and Catalonia, or between Senegal and Catalonia. Oh, excuse me. Okay. So this paper, this is the structure of the presentation. First of all, I want to explain a little bit about abstracts, and then I examine the telephony and internet growth in Senegal, and then migration, ITC and development, use of practicing of ITC by immigrants in Catalonia, mobile phone and email as object of cultural and social construction, Senegalese immigrants, and ITC and co-development at a distance, and to examine how to manage the co-development projects through email and mobile phone, and some conclusions. As we have little time, I think I'm going to read, so we are not going to. Okay. So our interest here was to see how the mobile phone and email may be considered as constituent tools of social, economic, and political transformation in origin countries like my country of origin, which is Senegal, and how they can be continual tools of fabrication in co-development. I will come again in the time of co-development. Maybe it's not a term familiar for some people here. We were also interested about the regular information exchange between immigrants settling in Spain and their compatriots or counterpart based in Senegal. We were also concerned about the instrumental role that the mobile phone and email can play in the micro coordination of a distance co-development, the information exchange. To sum up, we aim to foment a critical debate and the vision of co-development, because now there is a lot of literature. Stress the role of the mobile phone and email in the creation of community identities. We want also to foresee a new theoretical framework based on an understanding that the relationship between the country of origin and immigration cannot only be formulated on a system of remittance, because a lot of co-development literature is based on remittances and not on competencies and knowledge, but they speak little about the role and the function of the ITCs in the co-development system. Our methodology is very simple. We did in-depth interviews held with immigrants in Catalonia, and interviews and observation from Senegalese technicians based in Dakar. We asked special permission to one of the organizations. We examined the emails and the text sent because myself, I belong to GER Africa, and as a partner of the project, I could receive the emails and share the emails with all the in the project. Maybe I have to explain a little bit about Senegal, which is located in the extreme west of African continent. We have neighboring such as Gambia, Guinea-Conakry, Mauritania, Mali, Guinea-Bissau. We have more than 2 million of Senegalese who are living abroad. Many destinations, including the president of Senegal. He was one day saying, "You can find Senegalese in the moon." So, so we are in France, in US, in Italy, in African states, in Spain. We are around now 11 million of people in 2009. It's a very small country. The country is politically and socially stable because we have it's one of the more democratic, in brackets, country in Africa, because we never have a coup d'etat. And the country is very peaceful and stable politically speaking. Here I wanted to show a little bit Gambia, because Gambia is a country, geographically speaking, small country inside Senegal. So, and I'm too interested studying Gambian peoples, but I'm not going to tell about Gambians here. Okay. About telephone internet growth in Senegal, one of the highest mobile phone densities in Africa. I think my colleague Adela can say that, because she visited Senegal and she could see the density of these things. During 2003, according to some study, we have more than 5% of people owned a mobile phone. There is now a lot of literature about telephony and mobile phone in Senegal. We have these kind of vouchers that you can have them in my paper, in our paper. They all studied about the mobile phone in Senegal and all the ITCs in West Africa. Here we have, for example, one of the company, Orange, who is now settled in Senegal, and who is one of the the biggest company who now own these mobile phones. We have more than 4 million people who own SIM cards and subscribes to the Sonatel, the national company. We have a kind of a big organization called Union Nationale des Exploitants de Télécentres et Téléphones au Sénégal. It's a kind of union of call center operators, now surpassing more than 5,000 numbers in the whole of the country. The contribution is about 8% in the economy. We have a minimum price of the prepaid card that is only 1,000 francs CFA. It is approximately 150 euros. We have also possibilities of sharing prepaid cards. In Wolof they call that seddo, is sharing so the calls. We have, I think, we have a plan national de numération in all countries. So to explain you here, before 2007 the numbers were from October 2007, the telephone numbers of the country have gone from 7 to 9 figures. So this also can explain the density of the people who are calling. And all around the country we have big slogans like internet everywhere and for everyone. It is already a reality. Here I can show you a picture of in a slum of Dakar, and they there's Senegalese pretty lady woman, and they they are doing the advertisement. To talk very shortly about migration, ITC, and development. Here we want to, as Alejandro Portes spoke of globalization from the bottom, we can observe a strong relationship conducted from a distance. Transnational is a kind of transnational phenomena because there is an increased transparency in relation to the fees and development of bank transfer. We have more precision and speed in almost every type of operation related with ITC. Close contact between counterparts. There is including a kind of culture of virtual links, which is being encouraged and has become more visible and dynamic with the massive use of ITC. We have like a sense of belonging to a big diaspora thanks to the ITC, all the communities, Senegalese community. To talk about the use and practice of ITC by immigrants in Catalonia. These figures I'm going to tell, I think they are not actual because this was 2007. So we had more than 15,000 Senegalese in Catalonia. I'm sure now we can say 18,000 or 17,000. This is possible because of the family regrouping bonds. There is also a dynamic Senegalese community established with an intense network of relations. Some studies on ITC and Catalonia have been done. I think Adela has done some preliminary works. They have in Spain what they call Secretariado de Estado local telecomunicaciones. They also can give some information, but very small information about migration issues. We also had in Catalonia the studies of the Dirección de Atención Ciudadana. I was also reading in the short paper given by Adela that there is a report on the devices of use in information and technology among foreign population in Catalonia in 2009, I think. That means ITC are a very important channel of communication. You can see it here through the Spanish bank and program which interest immigrants like Banco Santander, Banco Popular. I can say now all the banks in Spain, they have this kind of programs. And they have, each bank has, for example, if you take Banco Santander Central Hispano, I think is that basis. And they have a program called Latino Envías, and they do it a lot with the Latin American people. The services offered are the transfers, the saving accounts, opening mortgages for acquisition of a house in a country of origin. That is very great. Savings and offers of renting, life insurance, electronic commerce, topping up of telephone cards, international transfer cards. And in the immigrant community, especially Senegalese, okay, the mobile phone and email reduce social and spatial isolation as well as barriers which they face. There is a kind of instantaneous maintenance of family ties and cooperation from a distance. Immigrants are now anonymous agents of local development in the regions. I wanted to talk a little bit about the mobile phone and email as object of social, cultural and social construction. I think everybody knows that the mobile phone has several functions. Is a kind of tool of vocal communication, written communication. It has a capacity to memorize. We can have images, photographs, sounds, videos. Everybody knows also that the electronic mail is an important tool that could has electronic address, contents, information with an object. I think there are a lot of ways to send an email, and if you do a very little survey around immigrants, they could say you everybody has an email, open it, even if they don't consult it regularly, but they could have an email. And I think there is an attempt to rehabilitate the social use of the mobile phone and electronic email in the social sciences. There are therefore plenty of anthropological and sociological studies. I think all these persons, if we look at them by email, we can find very interesting studies. Their studies tend to show the development of an innovative investigation where the cell phone and emails appears as full tools of investigation to understand the complexity of the contemporary information society, the possibility of analyzing discourse and producing new interpretations, the social construction, social representation, even collective myth. We know also that the ITC represents a tool which move on an everyday level the space, the time, the status, the facility, the personality. Is an important contribution to the development of the country of origin, above all the Africans. I was talking about co-development in the beginning, and I think also here we have a lot of theories and case studies. I think the best known is Sami Nair, Bruno Riccio, Eva Ostergaard, and there is a lack of information on the use of ITC in the field of co-development. Even if it exists a strong mobile culture, the phenomenon is not, I think, very recent among the immigrant culture. We can see also daily actions which are forever written in a particular context of the information society. Here, for example, in Spain or in Catalonia, most of the immigrants are connected or interchange messages via Movistar, Orange, Vodafone, like the natives, because there is a rush on these companies because the economical tariffs, the interpersonal and community communication. And we are seeing that little by little there is a kind of substitution of the post offices, such as fax, landline, because now even if you talk with the immigrant, they don't go to the post office to send letters, or they send the letter if really is a need to send something very big. No? I know I have very less time, but very short, and I'm going to go very quickly. I think there is a daily fabrication and maintaining of links with places of origin. There is in Catalonia strong networks of communication with between the immigrants, Senegalese immigrants, I could say African immigrants, with their country of origin. Here we have studied, I think you can see it or can check it in my paper, in our paper. The analysis of the email exchange between an organization called Arzucat, and Arzucat, I think in Catalan is cul-de-sac, in French it's cul-de-sac. Is the association based in Catalonia, and they did interchange in the project of rural electrification with Senegal, which is Ndoyen in a village in Senegal. So if you take I don't know if you have the text because I don't put the quotation. In page 11, you can see that interchanging. I have to stop, no? Okay. Okay, then I have to go to the conclusion. If you so in conclusion, then so I ask you, please, if you to check the paper, and then we can discuss after. In the conclusion, I think we can say that ITCs are very flexible. So we got a simplicity and oral nature of communication. We got immediate exchange and human worth, and constitute an opportunity to, when maintaining distance relation. We have development of strong social relation and augmentation of social capital. They allow us also for a constant investment in social relation and resources. About the interchange between Catalonia and Senegal, there are constant exchanges through ITCs, which allow immigrants to maintain family links and practice co-development from a distance. There is a much encored virtual culture. There is a permanent connection with social relation networks, all tied around the mobile phone. There is a strong support of external work and a greater precision of collective tasks. We have also important data which allow for the analysis of distant relation and above all exchange in cooperation and co-development. And for the findings, I think the debate generated by cell phones and emails is polysemic. And the meaning assigned is a result of an unconventional construction. So the expression of the distinct interpretation of this debate reveals the diversity of opinion. So we have sociological opinion, anthropological opinion. We think also that the analysis of ITC seems epistemologically like a true thought category and a new method of understanding social life. The possibility of analyzing the debates stimulated from mobile phone and emails and to produce other new discussions represent an interest and particular challenge nowadays, above all in the area of co-development. Thank you very much for your attention. And I leave you with that picture of Dakar. With a go-slow in Dakar, which is a very, very strange city. So you can see the policeman and the guy who was in the vegetable camion. He was talking in the mobile phone, and he's tied with the cables in the vegetable camion. So I took the picture, but I took the picture after he finished to call. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting case study, I would say. Ana Gonzalez Ramos from this university will give her comments, and please go ahead.
Congratulations, for the paper, because I really enjoy the reading of the case study. When I am not questioned, but suggestions or comments about the paper. You showed the instrumental use of the ICT, and I asked me about the inavoidable circumstance that around the people in Senegal about to use the ICTs, because I think that the use of the ICT is a consequence, direct consequence of the globalization. And I asked me, okay, but these people, how access to the ICT? For example, in your case study, people are linked with the Catalonian association. If this association there is an exist, will be possible that those people access to the internet for this project And I think it's very, very important and very, very relevant. Second one, I like a lot of the concept of the globalization from the bottom, because I don't know it. Perhaps you could use this idea as a guideline for the rest of the paper, because I think it's very, very interesting, very potential. I understand, I'm not sure, but I understand this idea like a political position. And I would like to know how much the use of the telephone and email for cooperation is really an example of the globalization from the bottom. Okay, I think about the exclusion and inclusion is linked with the first idea, because I think that we know to people access to the technologies. What is the process of the adaptation? Indeed, the feeling with these technologies, and what is the possibilities from not only for in a utilitarian sense, but beyond that, what is the process? I was thinking in the women, or the most poor people, or no illiterate people. Yeah. In addition, you comment in your paper that these tools are easier to use for the people, for example, for the illiterate people. But I think that is depends on the technology and the people, because telephone is easier, but internet is not so much in some cases. Depends on the use. Nothing else.
Okay. So again, any questions from? Yeah, that is just because we have not so much time, so it's better to regroup the questions. Oh, well, anyhow, you make the order.
You're first.
Thank you. Senegal is a unique country in Africa in terms of the. What? It is short. Senegal is a unique country in Africa in the development of telecenters. And I'm wondering whether that is reflected in a difference between the Senegalese immigrants when they're in Catalonia versus the other immigrants from other African countries. Do they use ICTs differently?
Thank you.
Just, I would like to be very brief. As for the construction of the social imaginary, regarding to development and co-development issues, it's just a curiosity, personal curiosity that I have. At what extent ICTs are used as by Senegalese living here, for example, to produce or to give distorted views of their daily lives here, and how this can create a biased social imaginary of Senegalese living there regarding the possibilities of living here, or yeah.
There's one other question here, and then
En algun moment parlaves dels enllaços virtuals, virtual links. En algun moment, si pots explicar el que eren, i si pots parlar una mica sobre la polisèmia del debat generat amb les comunicacions per mòbil i per correu electrònic. Sobre el debat, a la polisèmia en el debat generat a través dels e-mails i això, telèfon.
I think I'm going to thank you, Anna, for the contribution. I'm going to start with François Barre. About the question is if they understand it, do they use ITC differently? I think yes, they use ITC, but I cannot, maybe the yes cannot be categoric, but according to my observations and what I have seen and what I have heard, I think the use is very different because here, for example, what I can give for an example, the call centers, they call them locutorio here. There is a kind of collective socialization. When they went there, I even have seen in some locutorios when they can go and they made tea. And they can, you know, they can have conversation and they can have they can socialize. Why they do that here in Spain and not in Senegal? Maybe also in Senegal they do it in the locutorios, because here we have a kind of special interpretation of public spheres. For example, if you take things like the feast ceremonies, you can't do them publicly here in spaces, in public spaces. Meanwhile, in Senegal, you can do them everywhere. Even in the in the corner of my street, you can see Senegal people putting sound system and doing lot of noise. No, I think this is a kind of some very little differences you can see in. Basically on the space, also in the use of the ITCs. In Senegal, one family can share a whole mobile phone.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Take just a few seconds to finish, otherwise you take...
Okay, so...
No, just make a few statements.
Okay. So I'm sorry, and then there is a very big difference. I think we can develop these things maybe later. Okay, somebody was asking about virtual link. If I said virtual link is about all the cyber space which exists between, which relates some Senegalese in Canada from one Senegalese in Hong Kong, or from Senegalese in his origin of country, from somebody who is living here. And the polysemic things that I was saying in the debate, I only wanted to say that there is a lot of way of thinking in analyzing ITCs in social debates, like anthropology, or I think we have seen the studies of Manuel Castells and other persons that have done that.
Yes, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think your case study raises a lot of issues that will probably come back, and feel free to come into debates and tell your Senegalese and Catalonia position. Please, Anna, you will continue.